Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first meeting of a brand new group, which is really secretly a group that's been around for a little while, but we've kind of changed it around a little. Welcome to the Triangle Area SQL Server User Group's special interest group on data science and business intelligence. And tonight, we have the pleasure of Neil Hambly coming in to us from over just a short distance from us. Not too far away, just several time zones. So we definitely appreciate Neil taking the time this late evening for him and talking to us about M, which is one of my 10 favorite functional style languages. So please take it away, Neil.
It's great to be able to join you, and I'm really looking forward to sharing some of my knowledge around the Power BI. As you can see probably from this kind of a mock-up of the kind of intro screen, this is all about the Power M query, part of kind of the ingestion and transformation of data preparation for Power BI. I'm a Microsoft MCT. That means I'm a certified trainer for Microsoft. And I spend my days like today and yesterday and tomorrow and other days, pretty much most weeks, doing training around data science technologies and also Power BI. So this week I'm doing a data science DP100 3-day curriculum, and Thursday, Friday, I have the privilege of doing some Power BI training for a new client. So that's really exciting. Next week, guess what? I've got some more Power BI training to deliver. So it does never stop, and I kind of just love doing all this training. But I'm kind of from the UK. I've been around 20 years or so. I this year became an MVP, so that's my first actual presentation of being an MVP. So I really look forward to kind of doing more community work. So I've got plenty sessions already lined up. But let's look at what we have today for you. This is going to be the next slide, and this is going to cover what we're doing in here. Now, this is a larger kind of delivery that I've done a few times. It's kind of the advanced Power Query shaping kind of session, and I'm going to cover the first 3 modules inside of that. So the morning session in here, but without the labs. What I will do is actually be kind of breaking this down and doing video recordings of this and putting it on my YouTube channel at some point. So I'll make Kevin aware of that once we get to that. But tonight we're going to cover kind of intro to what is the kind of M query language and Power BI and ingestion of data. And then we're going to pick that up and show you some ways of creating relationships and other techniques of bringing data and shaping it. And then we've got a bit of advanced M in there as well. So there's more content that I'm going to be able to share in the 1 hour or so we have. If you have questions, do make sure you throw those into the chat window. And I will be stopping every so often just to nudge Kevin and ask him if there's questions in there. So make sure you get them in there, and we will be able to answer those as we go. So this was essentially what we do in module 1, basic data modeling. We're going to go through this at pace. So hopefully you kind of are familiar a little bit with most of the content here. I want to get to the core of the session, which is the M query stuff. So module objectives was to understand the basic architecture of the desktop and modeling. We understand that we have lots of data sources. We're going to use the query editor, the M query editor, PQE, to bring data in and perform and transform and load the data into Power BI model. Once we have it in the model, we can do some fancy reporting capabilities, enhance that model with measures, and do some kind of formatting and all that great stuff. I'm going to show you a number of ways of using the Power Query Editor or the M query to bring data in to transform, not just in the Power BI desktop. We've also got this in a few other services. I'm going to show you that now as well tonight. But we want to create reports, and we need some data. And of course, we need the right relationships with the right granularity in order to do that. And that's where the M query, the query editor, is all about getting that data preparation. So we understand what a data model is. But why do we need a data model in the first place? What's the purpose of this? Well, that's about getting the data and the surrounding, say, relationships through the dimensions in order to be able to query and showcase the data in a certain way. So let's in here, we see the fact table sitting pretty in the center here. Around that, we've got some dimensions. So this is pretty much known as a star schema when we actually create the dimensions and bring those in and join that to the sales table. In this case, we've got some product dimensions, some customer, some date dimensions, and this is pretty typical for most of your Power BI. It's not the only way of creating a model in Power BI. You've got kind of flat schema. You've got the ability to kind of have a snowflake schema, which is dimensions that kind of iterate out a little bit. So this is going to be the focus of what we're going to do, is creating the core model and relationships and how we do that. So as you say earlier, we have the star schema being the most popular, but we have flat or denormalized kind of structures, not the best. And snowflake schema is more typical now than I've seen before, but kind of star schema or snowflake schema, depending on the dimensions you have and the granularity and the kind of the data you have in that, whether you need to do a star or schema or snowflake. But I'm pretty much kind of putting those two into a number of individual one or more fact tables with dimensions that kind of pin off that. So we're not going to go through and look at the denormalized schema in this session. It's pretty inefficient and it can be slow when you start getting a lot of data in there. So it's not a good design for something like Power BI. It would be better kind of with Excel, and we're not going to go into that world, but Power Query Editor, PQE, can also be used in the Excel world. But this is kind of what we're probably looking to get to, is a star schema with some dimensions that are going to be spun around at least one fact table, potentially more, and the fact table being the many side of that dimension. So all this is hopefully pretty common for you. You already know this stuff. So if you have questions, let us know. But this is kind of showing a snowflake schema where the customer dimension, if I go back a level, customer dimension before had zip code and then state, city, region, district. So we had lots of replication, kind of kitchen sink type of customer dimension. And now we've got a snowflake where the state and some of the information there has been kind of removed from the customer dimension, and zip code then is going to join to that. So we have our one to many dimensions, facts being the many side, dimensions being the one side, potentially snowflake. We have that dimension where we kind of have the flake being the one side and the dimension being the money side. So we're not going to go into a lot of detail about kind of multiple fact tables today and everything, but that's some of the things you might want to do. And that needs to be figured out, the types of granularity you're going to look at. So maybe you've got a daily type of sales fact table, but you've got a budget one, is here's my sales target for the month. So you probably then need to have these two different fact tables and join them appropriately with the relationships to get where we need to be. But all that's kind of just the relationship stuff and getting that in. We want to work out how to get the data in and process it correctly. Okay, so that's what we're going to focus in on this session, is getting us to that bit there. This is where I'm going to take a quick breather and let you look at the screen for a second. Because I want to focus in on data types. It's very important that you figure out what the right data types are. And that sometimes is dependent on the data source that you're bringing your data in from. So let's say we're bringing it in from database. I'm pretty sure that most of the data we have will already be pretty much kind of in the correct data types. You know, the relationships are there, the parent, foreign key relationships, etc. But if we bring something in from, say, Excel or CSV file, and other data sources, websites, etc., it may be that we need to figure out the data type and get that correct. If you have to do this later on and change the data type, it's going to be expensive. So we want to make sure we got the numeric data types, the date, time data types, and others. And if you see the word like any as a kind of data type as a selection, kind of run for the hills, you're going to have some performance issues there. So kind of that's something you need to just be aware of. I was going to just move my cursor around for a second and just get some, there we go. I'm going to get that one off and running. Cool. So let's look at what we have. Oh, sorry, my clicked on the wrong thing. There we go. Let me click on the right screen. There we go. The whole reason why we're also trying to get the right schema, the right data model, and just kind of have the right columns selected with the right data types, is we want to get the most use of that in-memory data that we have. So we know Power BI is an in-memory object. We have this kind of tabular data set that we're going to be using, and it just kind of needs to be really efficient. So we want to make sure that we have a good data model that just has what we need, but only what we need. Now, potentially, if you've got a very large data set, you're probably going to have some types of summarization, and we could do some of those summarizations inside of Power BI, and then push out the more granular detail queries back to the back end in order to get the queries that we need and get the granular data. But the month level reports, you're probably going to be looking at that kind of stuff. We maybe roll that up and have that in our data model. Okay, so we're going to just skip through a couple of these entries here, because this is where I want to get you to. Module 1 was just kind of like, normally that would take me like 40 minutes to get the students up and running and kind of get them Power BI desktop loaded, etc. I want to get to the goods here, which is the module 2, getting started with the M or Power Query language. So if you know what M stands for, it's actually kind of a mashup kind of word. So it's taking data from different data sources and bringing that in and doing correct kind of processing on that data in order to get it into the right shape for reporting. So you can have different systems need data in a different shape, different kind of processing, so filling gaps in, capitalizing values, all that kind of stuff we need to do in the preparation. We need to make sure we do that correctly. Now, we need to understand here the basic syntax of the M query language, the functions and keyword structure that we can use in the M language, how to use and connect to data, and something what we call the advanced editor. I'm going to show you how we kind of manipulate the processes, the steps we're going to do, the transforms in sequence, and how we can kind of do that very easily with the advanced editor, and play a few tricks on Power BI as well. So overall, we're going to show you some of the functions, and we're going to create maybe some degenerate dimensions here, where we take a dimension and we kind of make it a bit more fit for purpose. So what we're going to show here is a very colorful screen of a Rubik's Cube to demonstrate the kind of the transform capabilities. We've got lots of different dimensions coming in, and we can slice and dice this thing to the end of the world. What we end up being, though, is what questions are we trying to ask and answer with our Power BI report, and how do we get it into the right shape and order and state so that we can do that effectively? So how do we optimize that model? And we're going to have our fact tables and our dimensions. So we need to know ahead of time the kind of audience and who those for. Now, I see many Power BI reports built by Power BI developers for what they think they want to build and what's interesting and fun for them. Often they don't necessarily have a good grasp of why the report is poorly used, because the audience that it was intended for, it wasn't designed for that. We need to make sure that we understand the dimensions. In fact, actually, probably don't try and make a fit all the purposes in the world type of report. We have a focus on maybe the 4 or 5 kind of key questions that this data set or these data sets that we're going to use are going to need to have. We can have a different report that has a different focus and different audience that maybe is going to be prepared differently, and we're going to have some different data in there. But we need to understand why M exists and how to build that. So let's kind of look at how we do that. So first off, there's always multiple ways to skin that cat, and that poor cat is being skinned all the time. We have simple ways of doing it. We have kind of more advanced ways, and then we have the custom code, kind of more kind of coded ways. You will probably start with using the ribbon to get kind of the majority of what you want done. And then at some point, that's not going to cut it. You're not going to be able to do everything you need with the ribbon. You're going to need to go into the code and start typing. So we're going to show you a little bit around that. Of course, we've only got a certain amount of time to cover today, about 45 minutes left to go through all the content. So let's kind of crack on, as they say. So here's the ribbons that we have. I'm just going to also kind of, oops, wrong screen, go in here and zoom in a little bit. So you're probably familiar with these different tabs that we have. So, home, transform, add column, and all the different ribbon items. And if you're not, that's kind of where I would say you probably need to go and figure out where you'll need to kind of understand of what's here. I would say some of the other services I'm going to show that use kind of Power Query have slightly different interfaces as well. And I was just looking at some of the data before I came on today, and I looked at a new Azure Data Factory Power Query option, and that also has a new feature I've been waiting for a while, which allows me to select a column and add a key to that, which we can't do here easily. We can do it in code, but we can't do it in the UI, and I was showing you kind of how we do that later. But often I spend my time in the advanced editor. I'm writing code, I'm pasting, I'm manipulating the code, and I'm just a coding type person, so I kind of do things in syntax. User interface is a great way, and often I teach people how to do things with the syntax, with the ribbon, but I'm more kind of back end, coding ways. One thing I need to make sure that you are fully aware of is right at the bottom in red, M is a case sensitive language. It's a bit of a sensitive little kind of a buddy there. If you don't speak to it in the right way, it throws a bit of a tantrum. So, you've been warned. I get caught on that still, even now. So make sure it's case sensitive, and kind of we will be making use of kind of certain keywords in lowercase and case sensitive there as we go. Key concepts of M is the M formulas. So the syntax that we need, like object dot and then the action, listing the objects like table, list, text, etc., all of those, and then certain camel case actions. This is where you get caught out. Day of week, capital D, capital O, capital W, to number, capital T, capital N, etc., etc. You can see all of those. If you kind of don't quite get that down, or you kind of just forget that you have to do that, you can kind of why is this thing not working? It's like, so what I tend to do is just make sure that I when I'm writing the formulas, I kind of make sure I go back and look at my case sensitivity. Now, there are some little helper words that we have which are never capitalized. So the let, the in, kind of will show you kind of some in some of these if then else and not, you got all these ones, they're always lowercase. And then key punctuation, you're going to capital C for column, capital L for list. Use and then lowercase, kind of that. So it's one of those challenges you're going to have is the sensitivity of it. And then we can use the hash keyword. So hash date time zone, hash duration, binary, kind of those sections. These are going to help you kind of build out your code as well. So there's a Power Query formula language. I suggest you go and find a good reference material. There's definitely some good ones out there, and I will endeavor to give you some links for those as well. But this is kind of one of the key things you're going to find is you're going to be processing text functions. So understand how the mQuery language does things. And if you've got Excel skills, you'll probably be able to see kind of the similar version of that. But let's look at the very latter one. Find position of 5. In M, it's position of the name of the column 5. Very straightforward. The number here, if I go to number 5, position of my column 5, we have the value of 7. If we go and look in Excel, it's the value of 8 because it's a different array starting point. So you just need to kind of need to find that in Excel, it starts with a 1. In M, it starts with a 0-based array. Just make sure, because I've had people kind of post kind of, Excel, M, same queries, pretty much similar, just change the word. Just make sure that you kind of understand how these two work. Text start, range, left and mid are similar ones in the Excel world. And just kind of, there we go. So here's another example of the function syntax. Just get your head around it. Try a few examples. Remember the case sensitivity. And if it's Excel, what's the values? So for example, text starts with lowercase ABC. If we did the equivalent Excel syntax, which is in the second column, it will be true, whereas in M, it's false. So if you're looking at true, false, and maybe the position of the column, the value 7 or 8, that can be a big difference. That can blow out your numbers significantly. So just be aware how these two different systems are similar, but not exactly the same. Then we have some structures like the if, then, else, and I'm going to not go through all the examples here, but basically you kind of have that coding logic you can follow through and have examples of, okay? Before we're going to go any further, I'm just going to do a sanity check. Do we have any questions that are coming in at the moment, Kevin? Or do we have anyone at the other end of the line? So go again.
Yeah, so Mala asks, when
Hi, Malala.
when do we want to use M versus DAX?
Excellent. Right, M. So this is kind of a question that you get pretty much all the time, and you'd think by now I'd have a good answer for it. Apart from the, and you know it's coming, don't you? It depends. M queries are going to be when you're trying to bring data in and actually doing the kind of the processing as the data is happening before you create the model. When you process the data and then you build the model, then you can go back and add and enhance your model with DAX to create like the calculated columns and measures, etc. So the M query is kind of the ETL, ELT, and the DAX is when you have your model in place and you're going to enhance it and you're going to kind of make the model more fit for your reporting by kind of doing some of the logic, etc. So the M is before the data is kind of loaded into the model and defines the model. DAX is when the model is actually built. And we'll show you some examples of that as we go forward. But that was a great question, Marla. Thank you. Any more there, Kevin, at the moment?
That was the only question for the moment.
Okay. I was just taking my break there. I usually pretty much get those down. Like, any questions? Like, I got like time for a quick break. Okay, we're going to look at. So here's some examples of the if, then, else. Let me kind of zoom in a little bit and see. We can say that if the region is east, then region 1. If the region is central, I add a little bit extra there. Then 2, else 3. So we have some kind of query logic that we're going to do. And maybe that's then going to color a region a certain thing, maybe for conditional formatting or conditional column details. We can kind of have region 1, region 2, and then we can kind of build out our coloring or formatting based on that. We also have the ability to do now if then else using columns from examples. So if you're not aware, you can kind of do add column from examples from the screen up in the top there. And what you then do is you start kind of choosing the columns that you want to have the data to kind of review. And then in column at the end here, column 1 down here, we can kind of start typing and we can have region east. And it will kind of work out the logic. And then you can validate the logic inside of the code and make sure that it meets your criteria. And if it does, you've got it. So it's easy to build up those samples from columns from examples. So that was a quick, very high level, and kind of normally there kind of be then some labs that people kind of go through it and try some examples. But of course, in the presentation we're doing here, that's going to take too much time up. So we're going to kind of push through and show you some other examples. But what I will be doing is building this complete set of training broken down into individual smaller kind of YouTube videos, which I can then put out and kind of give you the access to that specific kind of labs, etc. So where are we in kind of right now in the kind of flow? We're trying to kind of work out how to use M to build out our data model. So the things that we need to figure out is what type of questions, what kind of information do we want to provide, and what granularity do we want to do that at? So for example, we might be doing a variance on values based on a budget. Very common. See it pretty much in most of my customers saying, hey, give me those numbers compared to the budgets or the targets that we're trying to compare against. How are we doing month on month, year on year, these kind of previous month, last month, prior month? And that even might be more advanced where you're going to look at a previous selected period. So not last month, but the period I've chosen to compare against. So those go into more advanced scenarios. Now I want to cover all those today, but people like SQL BI put some great content out there, similar to that kind of scenario, where you got, say, August, and then you got December, then January, then say March, and then July. You might have discontinued months, but essentially you're looking at the last known month that's been kind of in that series. We want to know how to describe the data by X, Y, Z, T, U, whatever the numbers. So by product category, by product segment, etc. We want to know how to kind of slice and dice it. And if I had Rubik's Cube, that would be a really good one to show, but I don't have one. I need to get one, I think. But we want to normally take some data that might be denormalized. So something like an Excel report with a nice big wide sheet, lots of columns. And we want to kind of pivot that in. So that's kind of where we're going to try and figure out kind of where our fact table is inside of here and what of this information should be dimensional. So what's fact and what's dimensional, and how we aggregating, and how do we want to report on this information? That's what we need to know before we start any attempt to build our model. And this is probably the number one thing I find over and over that kind of causes a lot of headaches. I want to report on everything, or I don't know right now what I need to report on. I'm going to build a model. It's like, okay, what you're trying to do is build a fit purpose for everything type of system, and it's never going to work. So you need to understand what you want to do. And by describing give me the sale count by sales agent and group or territory or whatever it might be. And I need to break that down by some time periods as well. Okay, great. We can build that model because we know the fact table. We know we've got a dimensional table that's going to be a date. We've got maybe a geographic location, and we've probably got some products in there and some other information about maybe team structures. That's going to define what our dimensions and our data set is going to be. So this is an example of kind of building out that. We've got a number of tables here, but they're all at the moment unrelated. So I actually build my report off this. It's going to be unusable, a mess, incorrect. Because if I try and group by sales and I'm trying to selection by dates, etc., I've got no relationships. I need to figure out what the relationships need to be here. So what we need to do first is figure out where the data is coming from and import it. And we're going to show you how we do that with the get data connectors, multiple ones, and then start doing the transforms. That's the piece we want to look at. So let's go and show you that. I'm skipping through a lot of these. Notice at the moment we have no relationships. We've imported the data into Power BI from that database or a series of Excel file sheets or whatever it might be, but we haven't yet loaded the data. And when it loads it, it's then going to figure out what relationships it finds if there is no relationship already in play between, say, date dimension and sales fact. So if I say to you, which would be the columns on both sides of that equation for date dim and sales fact? Well, most people will jump in and say it's going to be dates and it's going to be date on sales fact, and that will be correct in this case. If the data types, though, are different in the model in terms of we've got a date type of one, and we've got, say, a integer on another, or it's a string because it has been brought in as some value. That's kind of where maybe it's not going to automated pick up the relationship when it kind of processes and ingests and processes the data. So we want to actually figure out what that's going to look like. And you may need to do some additional prep work ahead of loading and creating those relationships. So here's an example: categories and sub-segments. So I've got a category called rural, and I've got a segment called productivity and select. If I create that and try and join just on that as it is right now, my model probably won't work very well. What I need to do is probably have a category segment ID, some value to note the combination of the unique category and segment. So rural productivity, rural select. Those are going to be two individual, as you can see, numbers 1 and 2. These two here are essentially matching the unique combination of the values from here. And what we then do is we use this table, this dimension, in order to join to our other tables inside of our model. And then we got ability of having the hierarchies and the ability to kind of drill down and drill into our model. So these are the things we need to start figuring out as we process the model. Additionally, we will say we got a replacement index, and you can see that we have then the value, index value 1, 2, there's a bunch of 3s in there. That's be much more efficient in the model, but also it allows us to kind of provide a much kind of more constrained, smaller model and more performant model. One, because it's an integer data type that we're actually going to be probably performing our kind of aggregations against. So cat seg ID is going to be a better key in order for us to join to than it would have been if we were using something like the category, which is a text string. So we can see here, before we had text and we had text. And this one also, manufacturing ID 7, text. You notice that everything here is in text. This probably came in from a CSV. Well, first off, those 3 are fine for being text. This should be an integer. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my kind of my dimension, and then I'm going to have my category segment ID to replace. So it's going to be a much more efficient value there. Oops, I managed to come out of that. Let me come back to this for a second. So there we go. Sorry about that. Managed to hit the wrong key. And let me go back into the main view, and off we go. So I need to move the screens back around 1 second. Managed to move it out of the way. There we go. We also kind of need to maybe clean up the customer dimension in this case. And we're looking at the email account here. And we want to maybe know the first name, last name. This is where the inquiry starts, kind of what I call feature engineering, or kind of kind of shaping the data. I want to know the first and last name, but all I have is the email address. And the format of that is first name dot last name at, and then the name of the email domain. So I want to process that and kind of split it out. Now, there's a couple of things I could do. Position of, look for maybe the position of the dot, and everything to the left of that is going to then be the first name. Everything from that position, starting at that from a range and going forward until we see the at symbol, is going to be the last name. And then we kind of can strip out the at and everything else. And then we can kind of split these out and get our first name, last name. So that's the kind of transform that you want to do in order to get kind of the breakdown there. So I've not shown you any code right now. We're going to jump into those right in a few moments. Any more questions at this time, Kevin, while I take a break?
Yes, there was one question. Are column names case sensitive, or just the character / value comparisons?
So the code is case sensitive. The values would be, so you think of like an uppercase K or lowercase k. When you look at the ASCII character, it's going to have a different value. So when we're kind of processing that, it will be case sensitive on the values in that data set. So if that makes sense, of going back to lowercase a, b, c, uppercase a, b, c, we were finding like true or false in terms of the Excel versus the the M query, which is case sensitive indeed. Hopefully that answered the question. Usually I answer the question, people get more questions because they didn't answer know the answer. So we're going to go into some more advanced stuff and show you some actual kind of code. And I'm going to use some code that I'm using and processing for a Power BI client right now. I'm going to do some more work to process. So I'm going to jump out of my PowerPoint. I'm going to show you some Power BI stuff. So what I'm going to first do is show you, I think let me just grab the Power BI report itself very quickly. Okay. So this is the Power BI report I have that I'm using for a client, and I'm doing some work on that. And what I've done is I've clicked on the transform data, which is going to open up the Power Query editor. Oh, I'll try that again. Where'd it go? Click on the right bit. There we go. So what we have up here is we have our Power Query editor. We have our kind of transforms and add columns, etc. And we have the code, and we have examples of some M query code. So in this case, I'm choosing a specific column, I think the S date. And the very last piece of code I have is sort them in ascended order. Okay. When we go to a previous, let's go to a change data type one, and I can see that I have a different piece of M query. And I'm going for individual steps, and there's a bit of always going back and forth on each step. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my favorite part of kind of this Power Query editor, and it's called the Advanced Editor. So if I click on there, I'm going to get C. Let's kind of just put some real estate on the screen there to kind of give most of the information you need to see there. This is in lowercase, by the way. Let's manage to bath that up. Let me kind of try that again. Here's my let, and here's my in. So remember, we went back to some of the code logic. Everything in between that list in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., going down the list in this order is the transforms. This is my M query code. And it kind of looks a bit verbose, and it is a little bit kind of when you first look at it, it's like, okay, I'm getting some values, and then I'm checking it against each column or each row in that column called start date. I'm checking to see if the value is beyond, in this case, the 1st of February last year. Reason being, they want to have the ability to have a 12-month window. At the moment, this is hard coded. Not a good thing for them to do, because when we get into March, they're going to have to come in and change this code in order to change that this value here to a 3, because we will have March 1st of March last year through to the end of February this year. That's the 12-month window. Coming to April, we'll have to come back in again. We'll have to do that forever. That's not a good thing. So I'm going to change and parameterize this query, and where the value in kind of this here, so this will be the 1st of February at the moment, I need to create that as a variable. And then that, as I get into March and April and May and June, as I go forward, that's going to be kind of changing. So that's great. We can kind of take this overall code, and I'm going to break it down and make it a little bit more. It's kind of that filtered row 1, filtered row 2. It's not easy to read kind of the naming conventions we have there. So I'm going to make it a little bit more succinct, but also, and this is where I was kind of finding that is, you probably heard of something called query folding. I want to send my query back to the back end to make it more efficient, but I don't know necessarily which of these kind of transforms are going to be something that's going to be useful to query fold. Which ones query fold, which ones don't. Inside of Power BI, you don't have that ability yet. So I'm just going to cancel it. I can see all of my kind of applied steps, by the way, there we are, in the order. So that's kind of the same as the list that we had. And I could go and check on some of these and right click and go, let's cancel on that rather. Right click on some of these and go, Do I see the view native query? I do. Let's go to the next one. Do I see the view native query? No. Okay. So I'm pretty much sure that this is kind of where it broke. I can do everything above that as view native, but as soon as I get this, it's non-native. Let me show you a new feature in the ADF Power Query, which is in preview. Let me go and get my queries. Here we go. And this is the same query. Okay, so the same source, the same everything there. And what I've done is I have, there's two things. One of the reasons why I'm using this right now is first, if I go to my homepage, transform, and there's a brand new piece of ribbon that I don't have before called markers key. And I want to do is I want to take a column. I think it's, let me find the column I want to take. I saw it here earlier and I've lost it now. Where's that gone? Where's the one with the key? Okay, so I even can't see the column at the moment for some reason. I don't know why. Let me run that query. Anyway, I'll come back to that. This bit in blue tells me that we can, if I hover over it, all these steps in the blue lines down to rename columns are where I can evaluate at the data source. So they are the query folding columns. And I can see immediately it splits to the change data. Cool. So I'm going to spend some more time in this ADF. I literally started using this today and I'm kind of finding my feet with the tool. But this has a query that I'm going to use the same syntax. So what I did, let me remove all of that. I'm going to go back to my, where was the wrong here? I'm going to go back to my query editor. I'm just going to basically grab all of that code, copy it, come over to the ADF one, come into my Power Query editor. I'll show you kind of where that is, by the way, in a second. Let's look at it here, the new Power Query. I'm just pasting that in. And I'm going to paste that in, and then that's what I need to get the information there. Now I'm going to refresh that, and it's going to process that. And in here somewhere, I've got a database down at the moment, I think, by the looks of it, maybe. Let's see if it's running, because some of these are on and off. But it's going to, there we are, it is up and running. This was the column that I want to put the key against. And then this was helping me to understand which of the columns were, one, going to be kind of unique in my data set, and also which of the columns in the Power Query editor that's in the Azure Data Factory is there. So I'm going to do my code kind of here. And once I've finished and ready, because this is a slightly easier interface for me to work with right now, but I've pretty much got the same ribbon that I had before, but I've got some additional kind of capabilities in here. Like, for example, and this is the one I really like, I just saw this morning, sorry, about 2 hours ago. I'm going to go in and I'm going to go to view query plan. So you see it, kind of see that in there. Click on that. This is the query that is being sent to the back end. Let me kind of just shoot view details. That's the query that's actually going to the back end. So easy to find. And then I can see, make it a bit bigger. I can see which database it's hitting and what's the query and information. So I've got a nice query plan. Now, this is obviously fairly simple, straightforward at the moment. But if I go to more complicated examples of that, now I've got all of my kind of flow of what's happening, and I can go in and see the details. Now, this is going to help me troubleshoot and understand the columns and details in here. But also I can see kind of how, kind of, you know, okay, I've got a lot of renames going on. you know what, I probably don't need all these renames, or I'm maybe doing them too late in the process, etc. So the Power Query Editor is available in multiple tools. It's available in Power BI Desktop and also in the service as well. And we have some additional features in the service, Power BI service, around data flows and some visuals as well, some new stuff there. Don't have enough time today really to jump into that, because what I'm going to do is also show you, if I go to a new product called Synapse Analytics, and what I'm doing here is I'm going to build and connect to my data set and build out an example of, let's see if I got the, there's the original report. I'll just, why is that? One sec, I've got a, oh yeah, just cancel on that. Let me try that again. There's my original report. And let me go to the other example. So I'm going to put them side by side. There we go. So I'm building a new version of this report in the Synapse Analytics. The reason for this, there's multiple reasons for I'm doing that, but I'm basically going to help them manage and build their pipelines and put that code, the PQE Power Query Editor code, into source control. So the kind of the advanced editor, all that stuff, I can now inside of the Synapse Analytics actually manage things like my source control and create a Git repository, and then have the code that I'm generating in here fed into my source control. And as I publish, like I do in ADF, as I create my sources, I can validate them and do things that are like, let me go and grab things like this. So this is my ML ops, machine learning ops, that I'm using. This is my pipeline for building out my machine learning operations. The code that I'm using in here can also go to Git repository. So I'm going to have my machine learning code that's going to feed in, that's going to create the data sets that I'm going to use to ingest into Power BI. I'm going to get as inside analytics and put them into source control, and I'm going to have some nice Power BI reports inside that. But don't get me wrong, I love Power BI Desktop, and it's my favorite development tool for building out the different kind of reports and visuals that we are doing. So kind of how this all kind of works, and formatting, and lots of kind of different things that we are doing. So that 12-month, window of stuff. But we need to make this dynamic. So next month, it's going to say March to February 2021. And then April 20 to March 2021. And I won't need to do anything in the code. I won't need to go and change it. It's going to be dynamic. And that's what I'm using the mQuery for. Okay, so let's give you some examples of the mQuery. Let's go back to the example here. So you can see this is the view I normally see. It's quite small. I have to zoom a lot. My eyesight isn't great, but I'm using this tool. I find that I can use it, do the same steps, and I just get the text of the advanced editor. When I'm finished, I can come and take that text into here, go new source, blank query, advanced editor, strip out what we have, paste it in, click done, and this now will go and grab that data. And it's the same data that we had before, but I've got the additional features like column quality and column distribution and profile. I've got additional tools like my diagnostics. I've got my profiler inside of the kind of the tool itself. I don't have all those tools inside those other Power Query Editor locations because they're still kind of being developed. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what you need to do is learn the language. You want to kind of learn how to kind of where we get one. We go and grab group dates, because that's a good example, I think, of one where we are doing some kind of more advanced stuff in here. So we kind of bring this in and showcase and walk through it a little bit. So, for example, I've got some some text at the moment we want to change. So I've commented it out with a single line comment, which is the double forward slash. Or if I want to comment out maybe some multiple context, I can do kind of this approach here. Let me kind of just take a lap down the line. So I can kind of comment out a block of text with the forward slash star backslash, and then everything between those two is commented out. Useful to document what you have inside of your kind of query set. But we can see here that if we look at some of the code there, we're using things like the text middle. I'm finding the specific value. Let me go look at the inserted text range. Let me cancel on that. Discard. Go to the inserted text middle. There we go, and click on the little icon, little gear icon. And we can see here that what we're doing is we're taking the first time we see the ENGB, we're taking the position it starts at, and then we're going to kind of do a number of characters. And if we look at the data before that, we can see that maybe we'll kind of look at, what was this one? Insert text. Oh, yeah. So we were looking at the ENGB in the middle of that, and basically finding the range of values so we can kind of identify those, strip them out, and kind of do some text manipulation on the text there. But this is what mQuery is all about, is taking the different kind of transformation steps that we need to do and using the query language in order to build those out. Now, I will say you'll trip yourself over a few times as you write that language, especially when you get started. Anything like any new language, it's going to take you a while to kind of get the syntax down and the process of that. But this is going to help you do that. So if I go back to my PowerPoint slide for a second and show you that the way that we're doing this is kind of, in this case, we're doing the added separator. We're kind of doing the separation. And the next line down is kind of referencing the previous slide. Mostly that's the case. Doesn't have to be. You can reference a different kind of previous line, but you reference it by the name. So in this case, hash quote added separator or added last name or added first name. You can see what we're doing here. We're actually kind of using the previous code, and that one is going to be added separator. So that's going to that line. This one is added last line, last name rather, I should say, and it's going to the previous line. We are kind of building out the steps. When I run the code, it does it in this order. It goes from source, customer dim table, change type, split column, all the way down. And then the final one is saying, this is the outcome I want. Now, what I might find actually is I say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go with this one here. So I could do hash. Can't really kind of write it in with my cursor there, hash remove columns, and it's going to give me this outcome. It's not going to give me the last one. It's there in the code, and that's fine. But I'm just saying, you know what? I only want the previous one. So actually, what I do want is I want to go and give me let me zoom in a bit. I want to give me the outcome of this all the way down, but stop at this point. Don't do this last one. So this last one is kind of like kind of ignored at that point. But I could come in and change the code later on and do that. Now, that is previous to the data being loaded. Remove columns or change a type 2, whichever it might be, is going to be the final state of the data in this query. And then when we run that, it's going to build out and fulfill the data. And then when we create the model and all the relationships come on behind, it's going to build those out there. Okay. So just doing a time check. We're about 5 minutes out from the end there. How are we doing, Kevin? What's the query, the questions list? Is there one there or two or none?
Yes, there is a question.
Cool.
Does this due diligence get pushed to other users?
Right. Great question, by the way, and love that one. So does the due diligence get pushed to other users? The outcome of this data set can be, this data set can be used by other users. You can kind of certify this data set or just make it available for other users in a workspace. So you need a pro license to share that. and strategies around kind of compliance and that kind of stuff. But yeah, you could say, look, here's my data set. It's got this model with all these relationships and measures and everything else in it. And I'm going to share that with everyone to use. Now, if I show you I think this one here, and go to this Synapse Analytics, I'm going to, where do I want to go back to? One sec. Not that. It was there. Okay, cool. I'm going to, just can't remember, because this is brand new for me. I'm going to remember where it is now. I'm going to add a new Power BI report. Okay, so this is the data set only. It's not going to have the visuals. It's going to have the data set. If I click on that, I'm going to use the specific data set I currently have in play and click create. And what I do is I'm now going to build a new model based on the data set that is inside the data model, I should say, that's in that, that was inside the report that I uploaded. So this data model is available for me to have a look at. And if I go into, let me see if I can go into my Power BI very quickly. I think I've already got it kind of logged in, but we'll find out how quickly I can get in. If I go into the workspace that is in, I should be able to see that report and the data set rather for that report. Let's see if we upload. Which one have I loaded in with? That's fine. That works for me as well. I'm going to go into let's go into one of the reports there. This one here. I'm going to go into the workspace and I'm going to go into, let's try that again, go into the workspace and the data set is here. That data set, if I look at it, is the one I've just connected to, or a copy of that one I've just connected to. So I can go and build just the data set. What I could do is just go and then remove the reports and just leave the data set there. And then I could refresh that in the service every so often based on the credentials I put in and the gateway and everything else. Then I could just have you create the report that you want in the format, but the data set's being updated and it could be used by multiple people. And then we can go and say, look, I want to look at the lineage of that. There, I can see that that's my data set here. And that's being used by this report over here at the moment, okay? But I can see that it came from this database. I can see how many reports and dashboards. So yes, we could definitely make that data set available for others and provide that information, okay? I know we've got a couple of minutes left on the agenda here for today, and I'm throwing tons of information at you and it's kind of coming thick and fast. And when we do the full day workshops, it's a little bit more paced, I will say. But I wanted to get you kind of to the point where you understood that Power or mQuery is going to be kind of your ETL of your Power BI ecosystem. But it's not the only place you can do it. You can do it in Azure Data Factory. You can do it in the service. We can go and create a brand new data set here. We can go and publish a data set. We have a list of all the data sets that we have. We can perform many different things. We can go and analyze in there, create reports. You know, I can go and start building these reports and build and using this data set very easily. Okay, so that is a quick kind of fire off and give you so much information about what's out there. But ultimately, the Power Query Editor is this transform data section here. And then when we're happy and we've got everything we need, we are going to say close and apply. And that will apply all the changes. So I'm just actually going to say close because I don't want to make any changes I've got in there. And then that just goes back to my report. And when I'm ready, I publish it and I have a new version. I'm going to make things a bit more complicated in my world where I do kind of a versioning of PBX in different workspaces and source control, etc. But ultimately, that's it. So that is me done for the presentation. for what I can do in that 1 hour time frame. I'm just going to go. Then my timer's just kicked off. There we go. I was about 4 seconds ahead of my timer, so that's pretty good going. I'm just going to go back to this screen here.
One quick question while you're going back to the screen.
Yep.
Did you show how to make the date dynamic in the query, or
not? I've literally just started coding that this afternoon, so I haven't. I wanted to work out a way of doing that where they don't have to do anything themselves. At the moment, they have to go and create parameters, and I kind of want to try and get away from that from them. So I'm looking at ways of dynamically defining the variable that I need based on the current kind of internal variables, like my date time. So today, for example, I can get that value. I can conform it into a variable I can use. So, parameters and variables, yeah, it will be doable, but I haven't done it yet.
Okay.
So my task before the end of this week.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Well, that is pretty much it. I mean, I've got so much more I would like to share with you, but unfortunately, we are a little bit limited. It is midnight here. I do have a 7 o'clock start tomorrow as well, so I'm going to have to kind of crash off. If you want to get hold of me, you follow me on Twitter. I didn't put my information out. I thought I had there. We have Neil_Hambly on Twitter. Actually, let me just kind of, I don't know why. So here's a couple of ways of getting hold of me. There's my name, Neil Hambly. You can just get me on LinkedIn. You can get me on Twitter as well. So you can just grab me there, Neil_Hambly on Twitter. You'll find me. I'm out there. I look like this, and that's pretty much it. That's I think as much as we can do today. Kevin, I want to thank you for allowing me to come and present. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for all the questions, everyone. And if you want to see a few more things about my kind of Power BI stuff, go hit my YouTube called Data Train, and I'll leave that up on the screen for a second. That has a bunch of Power BI videos, and it's going to have a lot more coming up. I'm done. Thank you.
All right.
And it's over.
Thank you so much, Neil. Much appreciated. And I've dropped the links to your Twitter and the YouTube channel. Hopefully I didn't misspell anything in the process. We'll find out.
Twitter, it has the links to everything else, so you're good.
Let's see. Mike in chat says, I'm just mad at myself for not trademarking Data Train.
I mean, when I was like, data. So officially, my YouTube channel is, let me see if I got it here. My YouTube channel is called Data Plus Train, but you can't do the plus symbol in the URL. So it's actually Data Train as the kind of name of the YouTube channel, but the actual name of the channel is Data Plus Train. You can see it behind me as well. If I kind of zoom out a little bit, you'll probably see me point to it. And yeah, it's got videos around kind of Power BI, the DA100. I think there's the playlist for Power BI, some like 40 videos at the moment in there. There's a ton more of stuff coming about Power BI over the next few weeks as well, months. Go subscribe. I need more subscribers. Always need more subscribers. Kevin, pleasure, and it was good to speak to you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we are going to wrap up tonight's episode. Thanks again, Neil, for the great presentation. If you have follow-up questions or anything, go check out youtube.com/c/datatrain. Also, check out Neil on LinkedIn, on Twitter. With this, we are going to say thank you so much, and we'll catch you at a later time. Till then, take care.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.